Hey Chiefs Kingdom, Merry Christmas. Welcome into another episode. My name is Alex Liu and this is Win or Lose Chiefs News. Today in this video, I'm going to be recapping my 5 takeaways from the Chiefs-Broncos game on Christmas night. Another loss for the Chiefs, but I think there are still some takeaways as usual. Not so much this time around from the game itself, but collectively, looking back on the season, some things to talk about looking forward to the offseason and just generally kind of the state of the team. So we're just going to go ahead and dive right into my 5 takeaways for this week. For one, I mean, everybody knows this, Chiefs fans, non-Chiefs fans, this game really meant nothing. I think when the schedule came out heading into this season, having a game on Christmas night between 2 division rivals, it was slated to be, a bigger game than it ended up turning out to be. So Amazon Prime really didn't get their money's worth. Not only did the Chiefs not have Mahomes, but the Chiefs are out of playoff contention. So everyone expected the Broncos to come in and I think just blow the doors off of the Chiefs, really run away with the game on Christmas night. But that is not at all what happened. I was pretty surprised. I was watching the game with my wife, my daughter, my mom, and my sister, and we were actually laughing for most of the first half that we watched together at just how bad Denver was playing. The fact that we actually came away with an interception and that we were leading for most of the game. We were leading 7-6 heading into halftime, I believe. It was a meaningless game, a meaningless loss. It doesn't really matter that we lost, obviously. The Chiefs had nothing to lose. The Broncos had everything to gain and lose in a sense. They were still playing for, and they still, I believe they are continuing to play for the AFC West division title. They're still competing with the Patriots for the number 1 seed and home field advantage through the playoffs. So game context, meaningless game, meaningless loss. It was more so just cool to see the Chiefs go out there and actually give as much fight as they did, considering what has been spiraling the last 2 weeks with Mahomes and Minshew's injuries and really the whole team just continuing to get banged up, and the amount of guys that we have put on IR and shut them down for the season. This was a depleted squad. Third string quarterback Chris Oladokun making his very first start in the NFL. We still obviously had guys like Travis Kelce, Juju, Hollywood Brown, Xavier Worthy, Kareem and Pacheco surrounding that banged up, very much lower down the depth chart offensive line. And on the defensive side, you still had a number of guys playing outside of, I'm pretty sure, in addition to McDuffie, I don't think Jalen Watson played either in this game. But you had Chris Jones, Nick Bolton, a number of guys in the, on the line, the linebackers, and in the secondary as well, like Brian Cook, starters playing in this game. I said last week, I really don't like them even playing the starters at this point. I understand they're being paid. I would prefer just business decision, big picture, to just not even play the starters, but they did what they did. Thankfully, we came away with no major injuries, so that was also a good sign. So that leads into my second takeaway, which is just overall, I think, resilience for the Chiefs. So after Mahomes' injury and Minshew's injury last week, and the way we didn't even really show up to play in Tennessee, I think we're still feeling extremely defeated from the way the Chargers game ended, coming into this game as 13.5 point underdogs. Playing at home, playing a ton of backups. I was proud to see how we rebounded in terms of morale. I think that shows a true sign of character, even with a losing season, even not going to the playoffs, just to continuing to play and to actually play really hard in this game, really bounce back from a blowout last week, even when there is nothing to play for. Playing for each other, as teammates, playing for the city, the town that you represent, playing for the fans who came out on Christmas night. I think that was great to see. And they came out playing really well. They had that early interception, and I think that they just fought extremely hard really up until the end and really had a chance to tie and force overtime. The fact that it was tied at 13-13 with just minutes remaining in the fourth quarter until Denver took the lead for good, I think that says a lot. Not just about the Chiefs and just everything that they've been through, but it says a lot about the Broncos and how concerned their fans and team really should be that is what they put out in week 17 heading into January. So yeah, just kind of a glimmer of hope there, just amidst a very disastrous season for the Chiefs. So that was kind of a glimmer of hope, just a shining light at the end of the tunnel, just kind of heading into the new year and, really being able to kind of turn the page symbolically. I think that was important. All right, takeaway number 3. I just mentioned it. The Broncos showed that they really are pretty vulnerable. I don't think right now at this point in the season, especially when you have a chance to play a banged up, defeated Chiefs team that has nothing to play for. Obviously, teams with losing records and that have nothing to play for, they can actually be some of the most dangerous teams to play because they play spoiler down the stretch at the end of the season. But I think if you're the Broncos, I think if you want to be playing your best football in December, to have that momentum going into January, this just goes to show why I think a lot of Chiefs fans agree, but the Broncos really are not a very good football team. They might have a 13-3 record. They're certainly not as good as their record, and they're really just not that good of a team. Bo Nix is not an elite quarterback by any means. This is only Sean Payton's second year. The Broncos have obviously gotten better. They're not trash, but outside of a good defense, their offense looked terrible in the first half, to say the least. I mean, they had a number of bad drops. Those were off of very catchable passes. That to me was actually pretty funny. It's not really like the Chiefs did a whole lot to stop them. I feel like the Chiefs, it felt like we forced a number of third downs. The Broncos, for being 2 touchdown favorites, I expected them to be leading 21-0 at halftime. And instead, this game was 13-13 late in the fourth quarter. I mean, the Broncos did almost everything they could to let this come down to the wire and potentially lose the game. They didn't play sharp or look sharp at all. For their starting quarterback to be going up against Chris Oladokun, our third stringer, to let that game get to like the brink, potentially a loss for the Broncos, which would have been absolutely hilarious on Christmas night. It just would have been the funniest thing ever. It's just amazing that the game went the way that it did. I was especially surprised that at least 2 drops, I think, came from Courtland Sutton. And he's been wide receiver 1 for the Broncos for a number of years now, who has always burned us and been one of the tougher receivers to match up against and defend. But I think this just goes to show that, in the AFC West, neither the Broncos or the Chargers are the real deal, in my opinion. I think the Broncos could very easily get bounced in the first or second round of the playoffs, even if they do have home field advantage and are playing at Mile High. I know that they've had some good wins this year, but they've also had some wins against really bad teams that were a lot closer and low scoring than they should have been, and that includes to the Raiders. They're really not a very good team, but kind of like how the Chiefs squeaked by in a lot of games last year, that's kind of what the Broncos have done this year, except I think the Chiefs actually were a good championship caliber team last year, and the Broncos this year are not. They don't really have much playoff experience. They don't have any championship Super Bowl run experience either. So I think the Chiefs kind of exposed a little bit that maybe a lot of teams have already exposed throughout the year, but the Chiefs made it very apparent that the Broncos are kind of in trouble if they don't, get their act together going into the playoffs. But it's not like I care. I would love to see them lose in the playoffs. So, all right, the fourth takeaway that I wanted to briefly talk about is just kind of the idea of whether the Chiefs were tanking or not. And obviously, it's hard to really prove that, but maybe it's a little bit more obvious and apparent than I might think to some other Chiefs fans out there. The reason I bring up tanking, and not that I really care, because it's obviously good that the Chiefs are continuing to lose, because right now we have the 10th overall pick in the draft for 2026. If we continue to keep that spot and we don't trade or anything like that. There were 2 penalties late in the game that I just was really kind of confused in a funny way, just sort of walking away like really? So the Chiefs go all game without committing any penalties, and then all of a sudden, 4th and 2 for the Broncos. I think they're like at about our 5-yard line, if I remember right, and they were just, if they really ran a play, okay, maybe they get it, maybe they don't. But I'm pretty sure at that point in the game, they were going to settle for a field goal. They were just trying to hard count, bluff, and try to get us to jump off sides. And I remember while I was watching saying, don't jump off sides. They're baiting you. It's more than obvious. And Chris Jones jumps off sides. So that gave them a fresh set of downs, led to a touchdown. Then it goes to 20-13. Now, we had 1 minute and 45 seconds to work with, and that leads to the next penalty where the Chiefs, obviously the Broncos were playing pretty soft coverage. I don't think they really expected the Chiefs would be able to actually punch in a touchdown scoring drive to tie the game. So they were playing pretty soft coverage until we really got deep into their territory. But we drove down the field, actually had a chance from about the 20-yard line, and then after spiking the ball on a second down, It would have been a 3rd and 3. Chris Oladokun takes a delay of game penalty. I don't know if it was his inexperience as a third stringer who this was his first start. He's hardly had any playing time as a pro quarterback. I don't know if it's just inexperience with a 2-minute drill in that situation, but I felt like they did everything right up to that point, and then you take a delay of game penalty. Or Matt Nagy and Andy Reid just were screwing around on the sidelines and just for whatever reason didn't get the play call in time. And I don't understand that, because you have 40 seconds between plays and you spiked the ball. You had more than enough time to get ready. To take that penalty there was just stupid. So that turns it into a 3rd and 8. And then they had 2 straight incompletions to end the game. Again, I'm not saying at all that they would have actually gone down and scored a touchdown, tied the game, forced overtime. It's just those 2 penalties, in a way, kind of felt like maybe they did that on purpose. Maybe they were talking on the sidelines and they said, hey, you know what? If we get the opportunity, we need to take the penalty because we need to lose this game. Again, no one's ever really going to know unless someone flat out comes out and admits that. It just seemed a little too ill-timed, too good to be true that, okay, maybe this game got so dangerously close to the point where we actually could have tied and forced overtime or won the game, and that would have hurt us in the sense of draft positioning. I don't know. Whether it's tanking, whether it's just us also continuing to self-sabotage even after playing a pretty decent game against the Broncos, all things considering. That was a takeaway for me personally, watching, just being a little confused, but then also figuring, okay, maybe it was tanking, maybe it was just us being stupid, kind of like Xavier Worthy forgetting that he's close to the sidelines again and stepping out of bounds as he's trying to catch a pass, which would have been a first down. That was in the first quarter, but that's just my point. Last takeaway for this game, kind of talking about the transition period and an end of an era, really for 2 things. One being, this could have been Travis Kelce's last game in red at Arrowhead. Next week against the Raiders could be his last game as a Chief and in the NFL. We'll have to see, but if so, a mix of emotions there. Definitely a lot of sadness and just thankfulness, gratefulness to him and everything he's done. Also, this was just kind of an interesting last week and a half or so with the news anticipated and then coming out, I think it was last Monday, that the Chiefs are in fact moving to the Kansas side of the Kansas-Missouri border, and Arrowhead Stadium is going to be going away after the release ends in 2030. It will finally be knocked down and demolished and no more, and the Chiefs will be playing in Kansas in 2031. So really there's just a lot of things going on right now where it's just kind of turning the page, a next chapter. Kelce could be moving on. My family and I are actually moving to Kansas City next summer, 2026. We will have about 4 years, I think 4 seasons left to go to Chiefs games at Arrowhead before Arrowhead goes away and there's a new stadium. I'm going to miss Arrowhead, I think, like all Chiefs fans, but I'm also kind of at peace with it just being time, because I think either way you would have to build a new stadium or you would have to continue to renovate. Either way you're spending money, and eventually Arrowhead would have to be torn down. Kind of like how the Chiefs' first half of their dynasty kind of came to a crashing end. Arrowhead would have to have its final days at some point. And I think there's definitely a lot to look forward to. Kind of a new beginning, but also just a lot of cool things to envision with a new stadium and what they could do with it, with a retractable roof and different things, like hosting a Super Bowl one day maybe. It's almost not surprising that we sort of have this aligned parallel with Travis Kelce's retirement, seemingly the decision for the Chiefs to leave Arrowhead and build a new stadium, and on the Kansas side of the border, and then also just the way that I think Mahomes and the rest of this team are going to have to really reset and reboot the team and the franchise for the better and for the long-term future in the back half of Mahomes' career. Just with his injury and just where the team is at, a lot of roster coaching changes needed, and just how the Chiefs have kind of milked as much as they could from what they've done the last 7 years, and now we're just kind of at this turning point. With that said, those are my 5 takeaways from the Chiefs' loss to the Broncos on Christmas night. I will do one more weekly podcast to wrap up this season in the new year after Week 18 when we play the Raiders, and that is about to be, it could be one hell of an ugly game. I heard Max Crosby is already, I think, done for the year. The Raiders and Chiefs both don't have anything to play for other than, I don't know, who's maybe who wants to lose more. Not that we can catch up to the Raiders in terms of draft positioning. If they are within the top 10 drafting sooner than we are, I would assume they are. Yeah, this is probably, if Chiefs Raiders earlier this season, the game that I went to with my family, if that wasn't a rivalry game hardly at all because of the score, this is going to be even less of a rivalry game because there is literally nothing to look forward to or play for. Once again, if we have any starters playing in that game, which I don't, at this point, I don't really know why we would, other than Kelce potentially playing his last snaps as a Chief and an NFL player. There really isn't anything to really talk about, for next Sunday. But as always, I'm going to finish off the season. I'm going to wear my Kelce jersey one last time potentially, and I'm going to root for the Chiefs and enjoy the last Chiefs game of the year as best I can. Yeah, and then we'll start switching to monthly podcasting on the channel, just talking about off-season, combine, draft, free agency, and that's where we will go from there. If you made it to the end, thank you so much for sticking around and watching. Again, my name is Alex Liu. This is Win or Lose Chiefs News Podcast Edition. Please check out my blog. I'm going to have my Week 17 post down below this video in the description. And otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Happy New Year to everyone. Merry Christmas. And go Chiefs.